Hi guys, it's John here. It's Saturday, October 30th, 2021. I have been wanting to record a lot of stuff lately, but the energies just have not been very conducive, and I kind of see this being reflected back at me from other people. There's just some weird stuff going on. It's like there's a lot of purging and internal work that I think people are doing or going through these days. And so, although intellectually I kept thinking about all these topics I wanted to discuss, I've just been kind of like laying low. In fact, I tried to do a recording a while ago, and I was shown this image of a small little sailboat on very choppy waters. The skies were clear, but the waters were really choppy. It was like it was windy, and I got the impression that this period of time was going to be a little bit rough, but that we would come out of it in a much cleaner, kind of uh, more tranquil situation. My sense is that it's going to be right up through November, and there's also some challenging astrology going on these days. But I do want to share one thing, which is kind of in the sort of dystopian vein, because it does pertain to this Aquarian age we're moving into. About a about 4 or 5 days ago, I had a dream, and I get these sort of prophetic dreams, and I also have had a an ability to sort of predict the future, but my timeline is 5 or 6 or even 8 or 10 years out sometimes, and I just have this history of being really accurate about what the future holds. And this was true when I worked in the tech space. A lot of the things that I ideas that I had a decade ago are actually happening now. I actually had one of the first 1,200 internet websites on the internet, and I was online, I think, before even AOL, back when there were bulletin boards that you dialed into a modem through. Um, so I've always been very early, ahead of the curve on stuff. Anyway, this dream I had about, like I said, 4 or 5 days ago was a bit dystopian. And now it's also interesting because lately I've been having to upgrade my computer stuff and been jumping through a lot of hurdles, and that's been very time consuming as well. But sort of, it's forcing myself to move a bit forward in time with all of the current technology. And of course, a lot of stuff now is going into the cloud. And we saw this coming, the early stages of this years ago, but it's now sort of becoming much more ubiquitous. And in fact, one of the things I did was increase my cloud storage. And so in this dream, I was with these people who weren't, let's just say they weren't on the wealthier side of the equation. And one of them was holding an object that almost looked like a pendulum, but it was a round ball, and it had clear, viscous liquid in it. I think it was blue, and it had something to do with being connected to the internet. And the internet at this point in time is so ubiquitous that uh, everybody has to be connected, and to be an active member in society, you basically have to be plugged into this globally connected internet, and maybe it's going to be called something else in the future. Um, but my feeling was that these people, just because of their circumstances, the people I happened to be there with at that time, were challenged in that way. Because, of course, even now, it's almost impossible to live without a credit card, for example, or to have some kind of digital payment system that you can use online. And everybody's doing things like, buying stuff from Amazon and all that sort of stuff. And so if you're not able to be connected to all of that, you're at a great disadvantage. And so um, what I saw, the impression that I had was that yes, if you want to be actively involved in society in the future, you will need to be digitally connected. Now, that has a lot of implications. Now, just for example, I was speaking with a local convenience store owner last night, and we were just chatting because he's a nice guy, and I chat with him every time I go in there. And he was talking about his payment processing system and how he has to use a third party to do credit card and debit payments, and how much of a hassle it is, and how he ends up paying all these extra fees that just go on and on and on. And I was asking him, I'm like, well, when did this really shift in this direction? And he said to me that around 2014, it was something like 20% debit or credit card, and now and 80% cash. That's like 7 years ago. And now he said it's like flipped around to the reverse, where it's almost like 20% cash and the rest is all debit card or credit card payments. Now, if you're a marginalized person, say, you've gone bankrupt, or you're not financially stable or something like that, or you're not employed, or you have bad financial history or credit or something like that, it becomes increasingly difficult for you to be actively involved. And I would imagine that at some point there will be many more merchants who simply will not accept cash. Now, what that means is that you have to fit into this sort of financial paradigm in order to play or to be involved in society. And I see this becoming increasingly so in the future, where because everything is going to be online, in fact, all of the data on our computers and so forth, because of increasing speeds of internet, we may have very little data on our actual machines, and we may be connecting to all of our data and applications and things like that in the cloud. And for those who don't really understand, the cloud is basically where there are servers who host your applications and your data, and you just access them remotely from your computer. Whereas traditionally, for the most part, people have stored all their applications and data on their own computer, and they take it around with them wherever they go. Well, I see this future where everything, just because of technology and the ability to scale these things up, it's going to flip around the other way, where everything's going to be online. And now there's two aspects to this. One is that, like I said, if you're not an actively involved member of society, it'll be very difficult for you to be involved in society. And that could mean job, career, and all kinds of services that you would want to access. So these people become increasingly marginalized. And then two is that all of these companies are going to be hosting all of this data and infrastructure and applications and things like that on their servers in the cloud, meaning that they will have a phenomenal amount of knowledge about all of your activities. And we're seeing this already starting to happen, with like what's going on with Facebook these days and everything. And we've all known about big data and data mining and so forth. And we also know that the organizations within government that are responsible for security, I'm not going to name names, but that they actually have backdoors to all of these systems, and they're able to penetrate and analyze all this data. So in the future, it'll be, like I said, and this was made very clear to me through impressions in this dream. In the future, it'll be, for those who are marginalized, they will be increasingly marginalized and sort of almost ostracized from society if they're not able to connect and play with these big data and cloud sort of based ecosystems. Now, this is very still Aquarian sounding to me, because Aquarius is all about, it involves technology and being globally connected in the global community. But the downside of it, and there's always two sides to every coin, the downside to it is that we will be giving up a lot of liberty, I suppose, or freedom, or the ability to function without playing in that ecosystem of data and big tech. And that the players in the big tech space will become increasingly powerful, and they'll become ubiquitous in the same way that banks are now. Like everybody, it's almost, unless you have tons of cash, it's almost impossible for the average person to go buy a home without involving a bank or some kind of financial lender. And this is going to become similar in the tech space. And now there's some of you probably listening, especially older people, might be thinking, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll just stay off the grid, so to speak. But realistically and practically, especially for younger people who are just getting going with their careers and education and getting into the workspace, into the, this is just not going to be possible for them. That you're going to have to be involved, or you're going to have to be plugged in. There might be the odd exception, like say somebody lives remotely off the grid and they don't really want to be directly involved. Well, but that's going to be, in reality, that's going to be a very small proportion of people who will be able to do that. So I'm not talking about the Aquarian Age from a spiritual level right now. I'm just talking about practically how things are going to work out. And if we extrapolate from where we are now with technology and look forward to the future, I think it's almost logical or common sense that this is where things are going to go. Now, I don't really like this, like, because, personally, I've always used things like pop email and stuff where I have everything on my computer, and I've been doing that for years because I don't trust the cloud. I've had accounts disappear and stuff like that in the past. But the way that this stuff is being integrated now, especially like in the Apple ecosystem, is much more sophisticated than it used to be, and it's moving very rapidly in that direction. There's a lot of people. In fact, when I was kind of upgrading some of my computer stuff lately, there's a couple people I talked to, and I was looking at MacBook Pros, used ones, and they had small hard drives, like 256 gigs or even 125 and stuff. And I'd be like, oh, I need a lot more than that. I need a terabyte. And they're like, well, what do I need a hard disk for? Everything's in the cloud. I mean, that was literally said to me. Now, I find that kind of scary because it's kind of like, do you really trust these organizations with all of your data? And what happens if, for example, you can't pay for your cloud storage? Does that mean that you're cut off from accessing all of your critical personal data? Or does that mean that you just have to always have a job and always have a credit card and always have a form of digital payment to sustain this, right? Now, we're seeing this happen with streaming media, like whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or Apple TV Plus. All of this stuff now, there's no physical infrastructure. The only thing you have really is an internet connection. So this is like a little bit dystopian because, like I said, when all of these huge, trillion-dollar companies have total control over all of this critical data that we are absolutely dependent upon, and I see no reason why they won't continue to grow and expand. It introduces another layer of, necessity. Like I said, I compared it to the banks. Like it's virtually impossible, practically, to live nowadays unless you have a bank account, or, like I said, if you want to buy a home, you have to get a mortgage. And in the future, it'll be virtually impossible to function in society unless you're connected to the global internet. Now I don't really like that. Like I said, I've lived off grid and I really liked it. I mean, there's a lot of convenience to not having to drag around backup hard drives and stuff like that. But, that's, I think, where we're going. Like even here, this platform, YouTube or podcasting, you're totally reliant on a company, not a government. Not it's a corporation that can shut you down or shut you off, whenever they see fit, or change the rules or so forth. So, and we just keep creating and plugging more and more content into these platforms. And by doing so, we are making them more essential to us, in fact. So it's just something to think about. Like I said, I have a lot of experience in tech. I worked in tech for years and doing cutting edge startup stuff. So I have, and I was a programmer too. So I have this knowledge and information, and I hope I'm conveying it accurately. Like I said, it kind of bothers me that we are going to have yet more corporations involved in our lives that will be essential for us. But I think that's where we're going. And yes, it does fit in with the Aquarian Age on a practical level, a pragmatic level, which is like, an internet connection is now um, and as essential almost as lights and heat and things like that. Like it would be very hard to function without a cell phone or some means of being connected to other people, and that is just going to be a part of the future. So I'll leave it at that and just see what other people have to say about this. But my sense of timing on this is like 5, 6, 7, 8 years out. It's going to be, things are going to be really different than they are now, in this way, where we will not practically be able to unplug, or at least not for significant periods of time. Like maybe uh, you can go on a sabbatical from the internet for a few months or something, but not permanently, just because of employment and government and access to the media, knowledge, and information. This is going to be a part of our future, like it or not. And like I said, the in the dream, when I saw that, had this vision, um, it was kind of disturbing to me, at least for people who, for whatever reason, don't have the uh, ability to play in that game. Like I said, maybe they've gone bankrupt, or they are marginalized, or they are somebody who is homeless or something like that. Like these people are going to have a really hard time uh, being connected, and they're going to become increasingly marginalized. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. And when these energies shift a bit, there's a ton of stuff I want to talk about. I've also been going through some fairly significant, intense astrological transits myself, and it is probably going to be, that energy should sort of start lifting for me personally in the next week or so. And so I haven't been producing a lot of content lately, but I will probably resume um, on a more regular basis soon. So thanks for everything, and we'll talk to you soon.